If Anakin Skywalker had managed to convince Mace Windu to spare Darth Sidious during their critical confrontation in the Chancellor's office, the trajectory of galactic history would have shifted in profound and unpredictable ways. The heated moment when Anakin pleaded with Mace, balancing on the precipice of his conflicting loyalties, was not only a turning point for him but for the galaxy. A choice to preserve Sidious's life would have introduced an array of moral, political, and personal complexities. In this scenario, the Force roiled with conflict as Anakin, desperate and tormented by visions of Padmé's death, intervened. Instead of making the fateful decision to sever Mace's hand and align himself with the dark side, Anakin might have channeled his raw passion into persuasion rather than violence. His argument would likely center on his belief that killing Sidious would be an act of revenge, not justice, contradicting the Jedi Code. Mace, though resolute, could have hesitated, influenced by Anakin's conviction that Sidious must face a trial to preserve the Jedi's moral integrity. If Mace agreed, it would have been a reluctant concession, reflective of the internal turmoil brewing within the Jedi Order. Arresting Sidious instead of executing him would present immediate logistical challenges. How do you imprison someone so powerful in the Force? Anakin, determined to ensure Padmé's safety, might have volunteered to oversee the imprisonment personally, hoping to extract Sidious's secrets about the dark side. This would create a precarious situation, where Anakin's proximity to Sidious would only deepen the Sith Lord's influence over him. Sidious, cunning as ever, would use his capture to manipulate events further. Behind bars, he would become a master of subterfuge, sowing doubt among the Senate about the legitimacy of the Jedi's actions. Public opinion, already eroded by Palpatine's propaganda, would begin to turn against the Jedi Order in earnest. His followers, such as Mace Windu, would seize the opportunity to accuse the Jedi of attempting a coup. Even imprisoned, Sidious's reach would extend far and wide, orchestrating discord that the Jedi would struggle to contain. Within the Jedi Order, sparing Sidious would exacerbate existing divisions. Mace's concession, while necessary in the moment, would not sit well with him or other senior Jedi. They might view it as a sign of weakness or a failure to act decisively against the Sith. Anakin, though temporarily vindicated, would find himself further isolated from his peers. His close proximity to Sidious and his intense personal motives for keeping the Sith Lord alive would make him a target of suspicion. This mistrust would only feed his growing resentment toward the Jedi Council, who, despite sparing Sidious, would continue to deny Anakin the recognition and autonomy he craved. The Republic itself would teeter on the brink of collapse. With Sidious no longer at the helm, the leadership vacuum in the Senate would become immediately apparent. Loyalists to the Chancellor, unaware of his Sith identity, would rally to his defense, framing the Jedi's actions as unlawful. The Separatists, meanwhile, might exploit this chaos, further escalating the war. Without Sidious's direct command, the coordination between Dooku and Grievous could falter, but the Confederacy's war machine was already self-sustaining to an extent. Conflict would rage on, but with new and unpredictable dynamics. Anakin's inner turmoil would persist, as Sidious would continue to exploit his vulnerabilities. Sidious knew Anakin's greatest fear, the loss of Padmé. From his cell, he could promise Anakin the power to save her, dangling the forbidden knowledge of the dark side as a tantalizing lure. Anakin, despite his initial resolve to adhere to the Jedi way, would find himself increasingly tempted. The closer he came to Sidious, the more his confidence in the Jedi's ability to protect those he loved would erode. If the Jedi decided to put Sidious on trial, it would become one of the most contentious and consequential legal proceedings in the Republic's history. Sidious, unmasked as Darth Sidious, would undoubtedly use the trial as a stage to further manipulate public perception. He could reveal the Jedi's involvement in his capture as evidence of their political ambition, painting himself as a victim rather than the mastermind behind the galaxy's suffering. His charisma and oratory skills, combined with his vast network of allies in the Senate, would make the trial a spectacle, drawing the galaxy's attention and exacerbating its divisions. Amidst this chaos, Anakin would face a critical choice. His desire to save Padmé would push him toward Sidious, but the trial and its fallout would also offer him a chance to see the full extent of Sidious's deceit and manipulation. This clarity could potentially strengthen his resolve to resist the dark side. However, it would require the Jedi to support Anakin in a way they had previously failed to do. Trust, compassion, and mentorship would be essential to keeping Anakin from falling further into his fears and doubts. The ultimate fate of Darth Sidious would depend on the outcome of the trial. If he were found guilty and executed or imprisoned indefinitely, it would signal a decisive victory for the Jedi and the Republic. However, this outcome would not come without cost. The process of bringing Sidious to justice would likely leave the Republic fractured, with many citizens and systems losing faith in its institutions. The Jedi, too, would face an uncertain future, their role as peacekeepers compromised by the perception that they had overstepped their bounds. Meanwhile, Anakin's future would hang in the balance. His relationship with Padme, already strained by his fears and insecurities, would remain fragile. If Anakin managed to resist the dark side entirely, he might emerge from the ordeal stronger, having confronted his inner demons and reaffirmed his commitment to the Jedi way. However, if Sidious's influence proved too strong, Anakin's fall could be delayed but not prevented, setting the stage for a different kind of tragedy. The galaxy, though spared the immediate devastation of Order 66, would remain a volatile and divided place. The power vacuum left by Sidious's downfall would invite new challenges and opportunities for both the Republic and the Jedi Order. Whether these institutions could adapt and rebuild in the wake of such a tumultuous period would determine the galaxy's ultimate fate. Anakin's success in persuading Mace to spare Sidious would undoubtedly shift the narrative of the Star Wars saga, creating a cascade of events shaped by choices, conflicts, and allegiances both old and new. The story of the Chosen One, the Jedi, and the Republic would take a new path, one fraught with peril but also with the potential for redemption and renewal. The battle between the light and dark sides of the Force would continue, but with new players, strategies, and stakes. If Mace Windu had agreed to spare Darth Sidious, one immediate and devastating blow to Sidious's grand plan would be the public revelation of his true identity as a Sith Lord. This revelation, spread throughout the Republic and the galaxy, would unravel the intricate web of manipulation Sidious had spent decades weaving. For years, Sidious had operated in the shadows, carefully maintaining a dual identity as Supreme Chancellor Palpatine, the benevolent leader of the Republic, while secretly orchestrating its downfall as Darth Sidious. The exposure of this duality would be catastrophic to his political ambitions. Sidious's strength lay in his ability to cloak his intentions under layers of deception. As Supreme Chancellor, he had successfully cultivated an image as a tireless defender of democracy, a leader willing to make personal sacrifices to guide the Republic through the chaos of the Clone Wars. His public persona was built on trust, loyalty, and the perception of selfless service. But the moment it became known that Palpatine was Darth Sidious, this facade would shatter irreparably. The revelation that the leader of the Republic was, in fact, the Sith Lord behind the galaxy's suffering would lead to widespread outrage and rebellion, not just among the Jedi but across the Senate, the Republic citizens, and even elements of the separatist movement. The Senate, which had served as Sidious's primary tool for consolidating power, would turn against him. Many senators who supported him would feel betrayed upon learning that the war they had been manipulated into supporting was orchestrated by the very leader they trusted. Mon Mothma, Bail Organa, and other dissenters within the Senate would seize upon this revelation as proof of the corruption they had long suspected. Even those who had stood by Palpatine during the war would be hard-pressed to justify their allegiance once his Sith identity was revealed. The illusion of his legitimacy would crumble, stripping Sidious of the political leverage he needed to transform the Republic into the Empire. Public perception would also shift dramatically. The citizens of the Republic, already weary of war, would recoil at the thought that the man they had entrusted with near-absolute power was the architect of their misery. News of Sidious's Sith identity would spread quickly across Coruscant and to the Outer Rim, igniting protests, revolts, and chaos. The trust in centralized governance, already strained by the war, would collapse entirely. Local systems and planets might choose to break away from the Republic altogether, accelerating its disintegration. The very foundation of Sidious's plan, the the people's blind acceptance of his rule would be irreparably weakened. Within the military, particularly the clone army, Sidious's exposure as a Sith Lord would also undermine his control. While the clones were bred for loyalty, the revelation that their commander-in-chief was a Sith could create confusion and dissent among their ranks. The Jedi, meanwhile, would gain an upper hand in rallying both the clones and the public against Sidious. With Sidious unmasked, the justification for Order 66 would lose its power, and the clones might question the command to betray their Jedi generals. Sidious's intricate contingency plans, including the eradication of the Jedi, relied on secrecy. Once that secrecy was lost, his schemes would unravel rapidly. Even Sidious's allies within the dark side and the separatist leadership would find themselves destabilized by the news. Count Dooku's faith in Sidious, for example, might be shaken if he learned that his master had orchestrated his capture and potential execution to manipulate Anakin. Similarly, figures like Grievous might question their role in Sidious's grand design, realizing that they too were pawns in a larger, self-serving agenda. The separatist movement, deprived of Sidious's coordination, might fragment further, reducing its threat to the Republic. For Sidious, the revelation of his Sith identity would eliminate his ability to exploit fear and uncertainty as tools of control. The Empire's foundation rested on the belief that the galaxy needed a strong, decisive leader to protect it from chaos. But if that leader was revealed to be the very embodiment of the darkness he claimed to fight, the justification for his rule would evaporate. Without the veil of secrecy, Sidious could no longer position himself as the savior of the galaxy. Instead, he would be seen as a tyrant and a deceiver, unworthy of the power he sought to wield. In this scenario, Sidious's plans for empire would not only be delayed but potentially destroyed altogether. The Republic's institutions, though weakened, would have an opportunity to recover and reform in the wake of his exposure. The Jedi, despite their diminished numbers and the strain of the war, could work to rebuild trust with the galaxy by demonstrating their role in uncovering the Sith threat. The Republic would still face significant challenges: political divisions, economic turmoil, and the lingering effects of the Clone Wars, but it would no longer be under the shadow of Sidious's manipulation. Ultimately, the announcement of Palpatine's identity as Darth Sidious would strip him of the power of deception, which was his greatest weapon. Deprived of secrecy, he would be forced to fight openly, a position that would weaken his ability to shape events to his advantage. The Sith's greatest strength was always their ability to operate unseen, and once that veil was lifted, the carefully constructed path to the Empire would collapse into disarray. The execution of Order 65 instead of Order 66 would have been a pivotal development, profoundly altering the galaxy's trajectory. This seldom discussed contingency order, embedded within the Republic's military protocols, provided for the removal of the Supreme Chancellor under the condition that he was deemed unfit to lead, either by the Senate or the Jedi Council. Unlike Order 66, which positioned the clones against the Jedi, Order 65 directed them to act against the Chancellor himself, ensuring that the Republic's leadership could be held accountable if corrupted or compromised. In the event of Palpatine's exposure as a Sith Lord, the activation of Order 65 would override any attempt to execute Order 66, dismantling Sidious's plans for the Empire entirely. If the Jedi managed to convince the Senate or obtain sufficient evidence to justify the invocation of Order 65, the situation would shift dramatically. The clone army's loyalty was embedded in their genetic programming, compelling them to follow lawful orders from the Senate or the Jedi High Council. Once Order 65 was executed, the clones would redirect their obedience from the Chancellor to the Republic itself, prioritizing the removal of Palpatine from power. This would immediately neutralize one of Sidious's most critical assets: the ability to weaponize the clone army against the Jedi. The execution of Order 65 would also circumvent the key mechanism that enabled Order 66. The clones pre-installed behavioral modification chips. These chips were designed to suppress the clones' free will and force them to follow the specific directive to eliminate the Jedi. However, Order 65, being a different protocol entirely, would not trigger the chips in the same way. Instead, the clones would act according to their broader loyalty to the Republic and its leadership structures. Without the chips compelling them to view the Jedi as enemies, Many clones might even choose to stand alongside their Jedi generals against Palpatine. From a political standpoint, Order 65 would serve as a powerful statement of accountability. Once the Senate authorized it, the Republic would demonstrate its ability to check the power of even its highest-ranking official. This would reinforce the ideals of democracy and rule of law that Sidious had sought to undermine. Senators such as Bail Organa and Mon Mothma, long suspicious of Palpatine's consolidation of power, would likely rally behind the activation of Order 65, galvanizing public support for the Jedi and the Republic's institutions. The practical implementation of Order 65 would pose significant challenges, but also opportunities. The clones, now tasked with detaining or neutralizing Palpatine, would find themselves in direct confrontation with Sidious. Though immensely powerful, even Sidious would struggle to resist an entire army of elite soldiers bred for combat. The Jedi, freed from the imminent threat of Order 66, would be able to coordinate with the clones, creating a united front against the Sith Lord. The Jedi Council could deploy its most powerful members to lead the charge, ensuring that Sidious's reign of terror was brought to an end. In this scenario, Anakin Skywalker's role would be critical. His intervention in sparing Sidious and advocating for a trial would align with the Republic's decision to execute Order 65. Anakin, still tormented by his fears for Padmé's safety, would likely see this as a validation of his instincts. With Sidious removed from power and the Jedi Order reaffirmed in their commitment to justice, Anakin might find a renewed sense of purpose. However, Sidious's manipulation would not be entirely neutralized. Even as a prisoner, Sidious would likely attempt to exploit Anakin's vulnerabilities, seeking to draw him closer to the dark side. The removal of Palpatine through Order 65 would send shockwaves across the galaxy. The separatist movement, deprived of its secret leader, might begin to fragment. Without Sidious coordinating their efforts, Count Dooku and General Grievous would face significant challenges in maintaining cohesion among the disparate factions of the Confederacy. The Republic, meanwhile, would face its own challenges in rebuilding trust and stability. However, the execution of Order 65 would provide a foundation for recovery, emphasizing accountability and the restoration of democratic principles. In the long term, the activation of Order 65 would fundamentally undermine the Sith strategy of domination through deception and control. The Jedi, though weakened by the Clone Wars, would survive as an institution, providing a guiding light for the Republic's recovery. The galaxy, though scarred by conflict, would have a chance to heal without succumbing to the tyranny of the Empire.